Welcome one more time to the Inaugural Changemakers Forum. My name is Shoebox Moses, and I am so honored to be here. I'm a guest, actually, of somebody that you might know really well, Mr. Christian and Jackie of Yippee-Ki-Yay. And I just met these guys, honestly, almost a month ago. And the beautiful thing about it is they helped me within that short amount of time start my first 501c3 to fix my orphanage in the Philippines. I was actually adopted out of the Philippines in the late 70s. They found me in a shoebox in a dumpster, and I was adopted and brought to Colorado. And the cool thing about that is that actually started my journey and brought me here to you guys. So I feel like I got the golden ticket 10 times over. So welcome one more time. But I would like to introduce my man who brought me into this little circle, Mr. Christian.
Thank you. I really appreciate everyone being here. It's just amazing to see such wonderful faces, inspirational people, and people who really make a difference around here. So we're going to get started. It took a little while to get the lines in and get everyone going. And we are going to move on very quickly to the interview, and I hope everyone's enjoyed themselves, gotten some food, gotten something to drink, and is ready to move on. So I'm going to let Sammy, I'm not an MC by profession, Sammy is. I'll let him take over, and we'll just have a quick announcement before the interview, but take a few more minutes to enjoy yourselves, and then we'll all get seated and get to the main event. Thanks.
I thought you did pretty good. Hey. One more time, Mr. Christian LaFleur. So just a couple things that you guys have noticed. I know there's a lot of cameras, there's a lot of lights, especially for something like this. But in the back right here, we actually have a live testimonial room, and it will be going live on 1, 2, 3. We have almost 7 cameras going live, and you can go and actually promote yourself and get your company some massive traction online if you'd like, and we're going to have Jackie back there kind of running those interviews. So if you'd like to just kind of tell us who you are and share with the Facebook world, which could be 5,000, it could be 500, it could be 10,000. We're not totally sure. It's a big test. But we'd love to invite you guys in the back so you guys can do those interviews and tell us all about you, where you're from, and everything else. But at this time, I would like to introduce somebody who has welcomed us and welcomed all of us into her home, Shannon Stone, to kind of explain where we are and what this beautiful place is. So ladies and gentlemen, please, a round of applause for Shannon.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to my house today. Sammy, thank you very much. That was absolutely lovely. I want to welcome all of you to the AMG National Trust Bank. We are a private boutique financial firm. And I'm not necessarily here just because I'm with the bank. I am on the advisory board of Yippee-Ki-Yay, and I have known Christian LaFleur ever since he was raising capital to start Yippee-Ki-Yay. His values really align with AMG. We have really catered to our nonprofit community. You are standing inside the AMG Dome. It is, the building itself was modeled after a palace in Strasbourg, France. And the dome we offer to our nonprofits Monday through Thursdays at a discounted rate. So we're really trying to elevate our community to show and create opportunity for our nonprofits to elevate not only an organization and a community, but ourselves at a very individual level, and let that voice speak through our truth. I want to thank you all so much for coming. We have a full suite of services for our nonprofits, individuals, and businesses, ranging from business banking, wealth management, private equity, but that's not what this is about. This is about the hearts, this is about the community, this is about the children, this is about the difference that we can make in our community. And thank you all so much for coming tonight. Thanks.
Thanks for letting us into your house.
We have Jackie Long interviewing Amy Friedman of Book Trust. Let's give them a big round of applause, and thank you.
Hi, Amy. Hi, Jackie.
I'm very excited we get to do this.
Me too.
Awesome. So thanks again, everyone, for coming. As Christian mentioned, super thrilled to have you here. But before I get started with Amy, I also just want to acknowledge all of you again. All the proceeds from the event go to Book Trust. They benefit Book Trust. So thank you very much for that. Their purpose and their work is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so I am just going to dive right in. I'd be curious to know about your journey. So can you talk to us a little bit about why you're so passionate about childhood literacy?
Absolutely. Before I jump in, I too just want to thank Yippee-Ki-Yay and everybody here tonight for supporting this work and all the amazing sponsors. We're thrilled to have the opportunity to share more about Book Trust and the journey we've had to get to where we are, and wouldn't be here without your support. So thank you. My life's passion is how do we help kids get out of poverty through education, and what I've come to realize is that passion has been developing since I was a young child, and I've watched how all of these pieces in my life have come together to support me in pursuing that passion. And it started when I was probably 5, and I would drag my brother into the basement and play school and forced him to read things he had no interest in reading, and would make up like his quiz questions, and he didn't know how to answer them, but I would pretend that, you know, he did. And then I went on. In high school, I became really interested in studying language, and I was studying a number of languages at the same time. I was studying French and Russian and Spanish and Hebrew, and just was realizing that language was the way to understand the world, and that this world was so much bigger than my microcosm that I lived in. And I was traveling in high school. I was actually in the middle of the desert in Israel, and remember looking out the window and seeing carved in the side of this mountain this little village that had these like bright blue domes and ceilings, and I became so deeply intrigued by who could possibly live there. Like what language did they speak? What beliefs did they have? What made up their culture and their traditions? And that began this deep passion for me in trying to understand the world. And I took that passion for education and wanting to better understand the world and brought it together to teach English as a second language. And I started my career in Denver Public Schools as an ESL teacher, and quickly found that I was learning about the world through all of the kids that I was serving. And eventually I moved through the Denver Public Schools in a variety of leadership roles. I was really drawn to the systems change. I saw the immense challenges that the kids I was serving were facing due to the poverty that they were experiencing in their lives. And so for me, I wanted to figure out not just how to solve that for the 25 kids in my classroom, but for all the kids in Denver Public Schools. I left the Denver Public Schools after being the chief of staff to the superintendent, and so my work had really become focused on the policy and, quite honestly, the politics of urban education reform. And while I was deeply passionate about all we were doing to support kids, I was really missing that direct impact and that direct connection to students, and ultimately stumbled upon Book Trust at a time where I was ready to make a transition in my life, and have been incredibly grateful to come to learn about how important early literacy is for kids. All kids, many of us in this room are parents or grandparents, and we should be thinking about these messages not just for kids in poverty, but for all kids, because reading really is what's going to set all of them up for success in life.
Right. So that experience in public schools and teaching, what would you say were the main things that you thought could be brought for change for the traditional public school system?
Well, I think when I came to Book Trust, I came to appreciate the importance of joy in learning, and it's something that can be forgotten in the context of urban education reform. And a lot of our work was around building accountability systems to ensure that all kids' needs were being met, but that meant asking questions like, how is this school performing on standardized assessments? And for each kid that matters, that they're growing year in and year out. We owe that to kids, that when they come to school, that they're going to develop as learners and develop more skills in reading and math and science and all they need to be successful in school and ultimately life. But so many of the conversations became focused around this accountability framework that we veered to the extremes, right? And I think extremes in life are never healthy, and extremes in these conversations weren't healthy either. So for me, I came to appreciate the importance of having joy in the classroom and having reading be a joyful experience for kids. And for a lot of the kids that we serve, until they reach book trust, or until book trust reaches them, reading isn't a joyful experience.
Right, I appreciate that. I think that's a big distinction that you're making. There's varied viewpoints in the education system, but a lot of those are that it's forced a lot of times. And so book trust allows that choice. I think that's really amazing, and you get great results because of it. So in your TED Talk, from intellectual deserts to cultures of literacy, you talk about how you say that illiteracy is one of the United States' biggest civil rights challenges, as well as it being a moral obligation to make sure that all kids have the right to literacy. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure. I believe so strongly in this challenge that we're facing as a country. It absolutely is the civil rights challenge of the children in our schools today. We live in a country where by 2020, 50% of children are going to be from minority backgrounds. We are becoming a minority-majority country. And what we know is that poverty disproportionately impacts kids from African American communities and Latino communities. So the challenges that they face are incredibly grave, and the ability for this population of kids to become tomorrow's leaders, that's what's on the line, right? They're our future, and we have to support them in being successful. And the kids who come to school from low-income families, they're coming to kindergarten already behind. So we know that there is a word gap of up to 30 million words for children who come from low-income families by the time they're 4. 30 million words. And some of that comes from a lack of access to books and reading materials in the home. And some of that comes from a lack of access to conversation that's happening in homes. So we know that, in my family, when I was talking to my 4-year-old son about, can you get me the ketchup from the refrigerator, I'm talking to him about the red bottle on the 3rd shelf next to the dressing, and there's a tomato on the front. And in other low-income families, that might just sound like, get me the ketchup. And so that language and that language development that happens in the early years through conversation and discussion and reading books aloud is critical. And in low-income families, access to books is a very significant barrier. We know that in middle-income communities, on average, each child has access to around 13 books. And when you look at low-income communities, there's around 1 book for every 300 children. So imagine growing up in a home without access to any books. And when parents have to choose between a gallon of milk, and a book, that gallon of milk is going to win every single time. So that entry to kindergarten is a challenge. Teachers are working really hard to get those kids to be ready for 3rd grade, and 3rd grade is critical because the research clearly shows that in 3rd grade, kids need to make this pivot from learning to read to reading to learn. And it's all of a sudden where math, science, and social studies have to be accessed through that reading. And if they haven't developed those skills early on, they're never going to be able to develop the content and the cognitive skills, those higher level thinking skills they need to be successful. And so what we see is kids who aren't reading proficiently by 3rd grade, they're 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. And when kids drop out of high school, the consequences are grave for all of us. And this is why I believe it absolutely is the civil rights issue of our time, and why all of us should feel a tremendous sense of responsibility for owning this issue in our own communities, because it's going to impact every single person in this room today and tomorrow. The impact of kids dropping out of high school and adults being functionally illiterate is tremendous. There's over $300 billion lost annually in opportunity costs as a result of only 14% of US adults who are functionally illiterate. Those people, those individuals, those 40 million people who can't read and write are twice as likely to be unemployed. If they do get a job, they're going to earn 30 to 40% less than their peers who can read. And ultimately, these are the people who are going to drive up our healthcare costs because they have greater health issues, greater incarceration rates. They end up becoming a drain on our resources in our community rather than being able to support and lead the community.
Yeah, I was blown away by your TED Talk with those types of statistics. I clearly always understood the problem, but didn't see how it was like woven into the fabric really of my community, the future workforce, and things of that nature. So this leads me to my next question. I know that all the schools you work with, you're on a wait list, which is pretty great. So what are the main differentiators between Book Trust and other organizations supporting literacy that you think are, the most important as far as making that impact?
Sure. So what we do at Book Trust is focus on choice, and we focus on celebration, and we focus on consistency. And it's really these three components or features of our program that distinguish us from other literacy nonprofits. So first and foremost, we believe, and the research demonstrates, that kids who get to choose what they want to read are much more motivated to read and much more engaged in reading. And as a result, when they have access to books that they want to read, they read more and become better readers. There's not a ton of rocket science to this, right? So if you think of any skill you have in life, you got to practice it to become good, right? In the average literacy block in an elementary school, 90 minutes, think of a number in your head, the amount of time kids actually spend reading. Just get that number in your head for a second. 15 minutes. 15 minutes when kids actually are reading. And so if these kids are going home to families where there are no books in the home and they don't get to practice these skills outside of the classroom, there's no way we can expect them to be successful. So we begin with choice, empowering kids to choose the books that they're interested in, and they'll build a home library of up to 30 books over the course of the year. We provide children the opportunity to buy books. Many of you probably remember those Scholastic Reading Club flyers that come home. Yes, I see the smiles in the audience, the head nods, yes. And so what we do is we give kids the chance to say, you get to be a book owner. We're going to develop habits and behaviors. This is where consistency comes in and is so important. We're going to tell you, somebody who's probably received a lot of messages in life that they're not valued or they don't matter, they don't get much choice, there's not much they get to own, that they get to experience what it means to be a reader month in and month out of the school year. And so as those kids receive those books, and in our classrooms, high poverty schools, high poverty schools, every single child in the classroom participates. So when those books arrive, the teacher has the opportunity to really use this to elevate the importance of reading, get kids incredibly excited, and open that box of books and have them dive in and start engaging in reading and talking about books in the classroom. They get to practice reading in the classroom and have more opportunities to read independently before they bring those books home to families who also are getting support from teachers around, what do we do now that we have books in the home? What does it mean to have a library? And maybe if I can't read as a parent, what can I do to still support my kids in becoming great readers? You don't have to know how to read to ask your kid, what are you reading about? And who's your favorite character? And how is that character different from somebody else? And making those connections with the text is about conversation. And that can happen in any home.
Right. I know you clearly thought leader in this space, and I love that you were able to talk about those differentiators because I think they're important. There's a lot of people that try to provide a solution to that problem in a very different way. But that said, I know part of your plan is to back up some of this with some research and some data, and really be a thought leader in the space in the corporate world as well as just nationwide. So can you explain a little bit about what some of your ideas are around that?
I think, Christian talked a little bit about this. I mean, we really run our organization the way many of you run your businesses. The same principles apply, with the lone exception that when I ask somebody to invest in Book Trust, the return on their investment is going to be something that feels good and makes a difference in somebody else's life. You're not going to see that direct return. You're not going to get a product or something that you purchase in your hands, right? But this intangible reward or return on your investment is probably, in my mind, the biggest distinguisher. But all other parts of the work we do at Book Trust align with the way all of you are leading your businesses, your companies, your organizations. And so we have been intentionally asking ourselves questions about how to scale. And we have a strategic plan that has 4 initiatives, the first of which is deepening our impact. And we focus on results and how do we measure the impact of what we're doing. And we know that's critical to be able to compel people to continue to support our work and to scale the organization. You mentioned that we have a wait list. We have over 600 schools on this wait list representing 250,000 kids across the country who are saying, we want Book Trust in our schools. Today we serve 53,000 kids in 21 states. We're an organization that was founded in northern Colorado with 170 kids back in 2001. We became a 501c3 in 2006 and have had this tremendous growth trajectory because there's such demand and our results speak for themselves. Our kids start out at the beginning of the year. This past year they were reading 35% proficiency rates was the average proficiency rate for Book Trust kids. By the end of the year, they were up to 54%. And when we compared Book Trust kids and non-Book Trust kids, what we saw is that Book Trust kids were growing at rates that were faster than non-Book Trust kids. They ended the year ahead by 15%. And so there is tremendous demand for what we are doing, and we are trying to ensure we've built the systems and structures. That's the second initiative within our strategic plan is building that infrastructure. A lot of that has to do with the systems and the data pieces, but that's a lot about people. We have a phenomenal team at Book Trust of staff members. We have a national board and regional board. We've got a national board member and regional board member here who are supporting our work day in and day out, and we're working on figuring out how to diversify our revenue streams and to become that thought leader. And the thought leadership piece is critical to raise awareness about the issue and the importance so that other folks will invest in our work.
Absolutely. I'd be curious to know, in that space, do you hear any bad recommendations in that area of expertise?
So this is this like breaks my heart. This story, I was in New York City. We're serving 7,000 kids in New York City. This is our second year there. It was the largest community we went into with 5,000 kids. It was the largest number of kids we started off with in a new community last year. And they came back for more. The district it's the partnership with the school district and with the Fund for Public Schools, and then we are able to raise money in the local community. There was a school in New York City, and we were hosting an event, a Feed the Read celebration. You are all invited to come to one of our schools here in Colorado and be with us to hand out books and read with kids on a celebration day. And this teacher specifically left her classroom to come tell me she wanted, how grateful she was, how amazing Book Trust was, the most joyful part of her work. Thank you, thank you. Her kids are so excited. She'd never seen them so engaged in reading. She said, I actually had to tell my kids the other day during independent reading time, they couldn't read their Book Trust books. I was like, oh my God, why? What do you mean? And then she said, well, during independent reading time, they have to be reading books that are at exactly the right level to get them ready for their state tests. So that is an example of, the bad advice that can exist in the space when talking about reading, and how do we gets back to that conversation I talked about earlier. Okay. How do we create joy and a love of reading, and that intrinsic motivation, not these external motivators that will drive kids to to want to read more, and become great readers.
Great. So now I want to shift gears a little bit to what we've touched on a little bit here with your growth. So not only have you more than doubled the organization's footprint across the country since you've been on board with Book Trust, but in the past year alone, you've had explosive growth, 42%, launching you to that $5 million milestone as a nonprofit, which is a big deal. So can you unpack some of the key growth strategies that led you to that success?
So, I think it's back to those 4 initiatives in the strategic plan and really digging into each one and identifying those strategies. We really were able to effectively build relationships and new communities that were compelled by our evidence base to bring the program to those communities. And so we were able to go in at greater scale. I mentioned 5,000 kids in New York City and another 2,000 kids in Omaha through a partnership with the United Way, and 3,600 kids in Oakland in California. And that really brought us to this next level as an organization. And we've been working really hard to build strong relationships with our donors. We're funded through individuals and foundations and corporations, and the school districts and schools are beginning to pay program fees because they're so compelled by what we're doing. And we have a model that allows everybody to pay a piece instead of one person paying it all, so they can leverage the support in the community. And so we found that those strategies are absolutely working.
Yeah.
We also are stepping back to say we need to settle into what it means to be a $5 million organization, right? We've had a tremendous amount of growth, and we want to make sure that we're building the systems and structures to be sustainable at this level and beyond. And so for us, we're focusing on how do we ensure that we have that in place before the next phase of growth is underway.
Right, so you can handle it. So speaking of your expansion, I want to touch on your fundraising, because I know, as you just mentioned, you're entirely funded by very generous donations. So can you tell us a bit about your fundraising best practices?
Sure. It's all about relationships, and I think it's one of the reasons why it's so great that this event is here tonight, so people can get to meet one another and build relationships with one another. And for us, we really are wanting to find people who are compelled by the work we're doing. Everybody has their own purpose in life, and they will be compelled to engage with different organizations based on your life's experience and what matters most to you, what's going to move you and drive you. And so part of our work is in our fundraising efforts is to build relationships with people who are compelled by the work we're doing, and then tailor approaches to engage them in ways that are meaningful to them. It could be somebody who wants to sponsor a school in their community through their family foundation. It could be a corporation who wants to sponsor a classroom and have their employees come in and engage with that classroom. It could be an individual who has a book club and they want to create a Feed the Read book club celebration with their monthly book club and support students at school. So there's all kinds of ways to engage people in our work, but it starts with the relationship building, and it starts with the transparency in the work that we do as well. And I think that's something that's really important to us, to build that transparency so that people have that trust and confidence in who we are and what we do. And we are incredibly proud to have received the highest levels of rating, the platinum level from GuideStar and the 4-star rating from Charity Navigator, and we would not have been able to do that without UPKA and the support we've had from Christian and team in building ensuring we're meeting all of our fundraising compliance standards. That helps build the credibility we need with donors as we're moving towards those 7-figure gifts.
That's great. And 22 states now, I believe. So that's just a huge part of being able to expand the way that you have. So thanks for that. We appreciate it. There's a lot of gold in there. It's impressive what you've pulled off and will continue to pull off. I do want to shift gears again, and we've been talking a lot about business success and how you might get there and fundraising and all this, but it takes an individual to be able to show up and execute in those roles every day. You have a family, you're an executive, you're very busy, you're healthy. So I'd be curious to know, do you have any maybe habits or routines? Perhaps it's a morning ritual, maybe it's a pre-event ritual that later set you up for success.
Yeah, sure. I absolutely am an individual. I will let this be about me, but all the success is, as so many of you know who lead organizations, right? It is about that team, and it is about all of those people who are contributing to that success. And as leaders, we play a critical role, but it's always much bigger than us. So I will share with you. I was in San Francisco. I flew back this morning. I was actually at SOCAP conference, Social Capital. It was the first time I attended this conference and really focused on impact investing and how is that landscape changing. And so I probably got home around 2 o'clock, and so here was my pre-event ritual, which may seem a little masochistic, but it's truly not. I actually lay on a nail bed, which is, yes, it sounds like and looks like a torture tool, but it is this acupressure pad that starts out a little bit painful, but then results in relaxation and release of stress and energy. So that is my, not to be shared outside of our 100+ people in this room and everybody else on Facebook.
Happens in Vegas, stays in Vegas, folks.
Right.
Come on.
And for me, it's like, how do you get to that place of deep connection with yourself? And we're probably all searching for that in some way. And that is what I find in sort of those stressful moments when you're balancing all that comes with being a mom, being a leader of an organization, and making time to decompress and reconnect.
So that's awesome. And I'll probably be following up with you on that. I'm definitely one who goes out and experiments with all types of things in that arena. So that said, you have your day, you're going to your conference. I mean, we all experience this. You get knocked off your game left and right, something happens, the phone's ringing, whatever it is. What's something that you do or perhaps say to yourself, maybe it's questions, that gets you back in the zone quickly? So it kind of gets you back to focus when you've been sort of blasted out of your game.
So it's what you envision on that billboard, that, if you had that billboard, what would you put on the billboard?
Well, I can frame it this way. So if you had, if you had a billboard, gigantic, you could put it wherever you wanted, and it could have whatever you want to say on it. What's it going to say?
I think for me, it's that you are exactly where you're meant to be. And in that moment of crisis, it's happening for a reason, and to be able to step back and recognize that you might not be able to solve it, you might not be able to fix it. And I can sit here and tell you that I believe in this. That doesn't mean I always practice my own beliefs as well as I'd like to think that I do. But to recognize that some of these things are really just out of our control, and there's countless times where I've been trying to move something forward, or just it's not happening the way you want, and being able to step outside of the sort of drive within me that's pushing me forward to say, like, this isn't going to work no matter how hard I try. I need to step back and let it happen in its own time, because it's not meant to be. And so really embracing that idea that we are where we're meant to be, instead of constantly trying to move us to somewhere else.
That's great advice. All right, final question. Do you have one book, or maybe a few books, that you have gifted to others, and why? Or do you have 1 to 3 books that have greatly influenced your life?
So the book I like to gift to people, I have 2 books I'll talk about. One is Le Petit Prince, the Little Prince, for those of you who are familiar with that. What I love about The Little Prince is that it's the perfect book to share together, adults and kids, and the messages in there that are told through the voice of a child are really for the adults. And I think thinking about the Little Prince as he travels from asteroid to asteroid, and he watches each of these adults on each of their asteroids, And one is, the king who just wants to order people around, and the other is the accountant who only cares about numbers. And he ends his journey. He left his rose, right? And he ends his journey missing his rose. And what he realizes that it's all about relationships. And it's his friend the fox who teaches him that what matters most is not what you can see with your eye, but it's actually what you can feel with your heart. And so I think that time cuddled in bed with my kids reading that book, it's about them, but it's as much about me and reminding myself of those messages as well. So that's one of my favorites. The second favorite is The Soul of Money, and it was a book that somebody recommended to me as I was transitioning into this nonprofit space out of the education space. And what I really was able to come to appreciate about this opportunity leading this organization is that we have the tremendous privilege and honor of working with individuals to support them in finding out what moves them and motivates them. And for some people, again, it may be book trust, but for other people, it's about whatever your life's passion is or your life's meaning. And money, we all have funny relationships with money, but at the end of the day, it should really be an expression of our values and what matters to us. And to be able to work with people through book trust and provide opportunities for them to connect meaningfully and live in a way that's consistent with their soul and their true self-expression is a real honor. So,
I love it. Amy Friedman, you are an exceptional individual. Thank you so much for being here. We're honored to have you.
we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we are going to do a little Q&A. We've got Amy here. She's a busy woman, so take advantage. Sammy's over here. I believe he's got a couple of mics. So does anyone have a question for Amy?
All the way across. Oh.
Sorry. Thank you. Hi, Amy. Hi. Should I stand? Sorry. Why did you decide to go the nonprofit route versus a for-profit corporation?
It's a great question. So I actually am not the founder of Book Trust. I took over the organization from a woman named Adrienne Schatz. Her family founded it with her as part of their family foundation and then spun off this program into a separate 501c3. So it was a 501c3 before I even got there. I think that this question about how do we as nonprofits think about income differently and find ways to have earned income revenue streams is something we think a lot about when we think about greater scale. But the idea of being a nonprofit and ensuring that our focus is on giving back through the work we do has just been a priority for the organization.
I'll ask the next one, so I was so close. Wish my wife were here. She's a literacy specialist. But one of the things that she has found throughout her career is that so many literacy teachers don't understand how to teach reading. Have you ever thought about going into that part of the equation? Because it's hard to teach kids how to read if the teachers aren't really skilled in teaching reading.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think this brings me back to my sort of K-12 education days where we talked a lot about the policy issues, and we really struggle to get talent into our classrooms. The bottom third of college graduation classes is what's going into our classrooms to teach our kids, and so we really need to ensure our teacher preparation programs are strong. And to your wife's point and your point, the quality of teachers, particularly reading teachers, isn't what it needs to be. We are really clear that we are not a specific curriculum, and we are also really clear that we can support teachers in developing those best practices. So we have professional development that we offer as part of our program, and through that we are infusing those best practices so that teachers understand how to leverage Book Trust as a tool to support great literacy instruction. And so for some teachers, they get it, like your wife, she would get it right away. For other teachers, oftentimes the concepts we're introducing to them may be new, and without saying you're coming to your district's professional development to learn how to teach reading, we're really trying to infuse that and incorporate that into the work we do.
Besides the existence of books for these kids, is there another barrier holding them back from reading that you'd say was kind of primary just after not having books, like a social barrier or a learning disability?
You know, the challenges the kids face are immense. You know, and for lots of kids, it's hungry bellies, right? They're going home to houses where they might not be eating, and they're having free lunch and free breakfast at school, but those might be the only 2 meals that they're getting. And when the weekend comes, you know, they might not have food in their home. You know, maybe they're lucky enough to have a program that's getting food into the home over the weekend, but it can be hungry, you know, hungry bellies. We think of the work we do as feeding hungry minds, and there are tremendous social emotional challenges that they face because they may be going home to parents who, you know, single parents who are working multiple jobs and don't have time to even be home. They may have parents who are incarcerated. So, you know, it truly does take a village to support kids in developing these literacy skills that are foundational to their success in school. But it's much bigger than you know, any single issue. If we had this all figured out, we wouldn't be here having the conversations we're having today, and our education system wouldn't be in the dire position it's in across the country.
Hi, Amy. A question for you. So I understand from our conversation that you were in 21 different states nationwide. Are there any thoughts from a visionary standpoint about moving into an international space? Or are you really planning on just servicing the folks here in our nation?
So our focus right now is to serve more kids nationally in America. There's 16 million kids in Title I elementary schools, the highest poverty elementary schools in the country. And we've got our sights on 1 million of those kids. We want to at least make a dent in that very needy population. With that being said, we absolutely have conversations with international partners about the work they're doing, and there are some places where international partnerships could be more natural. We talked about Scholastic. Scholastic's the largest children's publisher in the world, and so there absolutely are countries where a model like ours could work through a partnership with Scholastic, but right now our priority is to make a meaningful dent in the 16 million here in America.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Sure. Michael in the front.
Do you compete with the electronic devices where they're too busy working on their phone and not reading? And with that being said, if that is a challenge, do you offer electronic books?
You know, we're not finding that we are competing with electronic devices in that while some of our kids and families have devices, usually it's mom or dad who have a phone because they need it to function in life. We're not having people say to us, we want ebooks over print books, right? There's a real value for print books. We spent a bunch of time a few years ago doing a pilot in Orlando where we put a device in the hands of the kids we serve and working with that teacher and really trying to see if the electronic books was a way to get more reading engagement or greater scale. And what we learned through that process is particularly in those early years, you know, that the primary grades, kinder, first, second, third, as kids are learning to read, that having a physical book is critically important for them in developing that connection to books and that sense of ownership. And so we decided that the bells and whistles that come with ebooks could really be a distraction for some kids in developing the fluency, which is an important part of early literacy development. So we said, you know what, we want to focus on print books and have been really intentional about that in those primary grades. There's a question for us about ebooks in those intermediate grades, 3rd, 4th, 5th, where once kids have learned how to read, could electronic books provide greater choice? And that's something we continue to wonder. What we've struggled with is finding a tool in the market that would empower kids to choose on their own. There's tools out there for parents to buy books for kids, or for teachers to buy books, but not tools for kids to go through that same experience and say, here's what I'm interested in, and here's what I want to choose. So that's what we've found to be missing in the marketplace.
Thank you. And since I still have the mic, I'm going to take advantage of it. Another question. You're talking about the children. How about adults who didn't get the opportunity to learn when they were younger? We work with more of an incarcerated or criminally justice involved people, and I'm curious about whether your approach works if you're doing anything with an older population or just strictly with kids.
So we are working directly with the kids, and we work through teachers. We have 2,500 teachers who are working with those 53,000 kids, and our relationship is with the teachers who then support the kids. But those teachers also support the parents of the children we serve. And so what we do is work with the teachers around what does it mean to have books in the home, and provide resources for those teachers to use with their families to develop some family literacy skills. But we haven't moved outside of the families of the kids we're serving into, some of the, whether it's prisons or whatever it may be. That's a good question. Thank you, everybody. Fun.
Hi, thank you for coming tonight. We are just downstairs, our offices are just downstairs from Book Trust here in Colorado. And we're also your Federation Partner Community Shares here in Colorado, and we represent you in Workplace Giving. And we just had you come to a meeting recently to talk about Colorado statistics. So while Shannon brought it to that international level, I was wondering if you could share some of the numbers in Colorado in terms of what your potential growth is or what your current traction is within our state.
Sure, thank you. And I'm glad we get to spend some time with you. Thank you for supporting us. We serve a little over 20,000 kids in Colorado, and we're serving kids as far east as Sterling and as far west as Grand Mesa. I mean, the beauty of our relationship, this partnership with Scholastic, is we can be anywhere in the nation. The demand for Book Trust, we are serving, a small portion of what could be. There's probably about 600,000 kids that we could be serving in Colorado. And we often talk about, is it better to go wide, go deep, what's the best strategy? And I think that what we've found is that as we continue to gain exposure in Colorado, we're able to serve more kids, but that there's demand for what we're doing across the nation, and we're able to build partnerships with folks throughout other communities, and we don't want to keep that, or we don't want to say no to those opportunities for other kids across the country, just so that we can support more kids in Colorado. But you are absolutely right. There's tremendous opportunity to serve more kids in Colorado.
So we have time for one more.
Yeah,
one more.
We're on the same page.
So I'm in the software industry, and we have the concept of open source, where software is written by people that donate their time. I was wondering whether such things exist in the book world, and whether this could contribute to reducing the cost of books for those children.
So I can give you a very high-level response to this. I have not been in the weeds on some of these issues, but other partner organizations that I know of that are in this space working with publishers, we work directly with Scholastic. Scholastic gets books from other publishers, and they get them, they distribute them through their reading club at reduced rates. We're not trying to work with lots of publishers to get good pricing deals or to have open source materials to be able to get more access. People I know who are leading other literacy organizations have really struggled around this issue, and actually people thought that ebooks was going to be the answer to having more open source materials so that more people could benefit from access to that content. But the relationships with the publishers has been very challenging, and the price points haven't dropped, and all of the agreements that need to be created have really kept them from actually moving forward with relationships with a lot of these publishers, to the point where many of the organizations I know have said we're actually starting to create our own content because it's faster for us to create our own content, and we can be more nimble and create it in multiple languages. rather than working directly with publishers. So I don't know if I'm fully answering your question, and I know we're trying to wrap up, so I can happily talk more offline with you about that, but we haven't seen a ton of open source access to the popular books that kids want in the marketplace.
There's a lot to unpack there. That's all good. Would you guys please give our panelists, Amy and Jackie, a huge round of applause. Absolutely. And we would just like to say one more time a huge thank you for making it to the Inaugural Changemakers Forum. And if you could do one huge favor for yourselves and for everybody here is to go on to the Facebook page. We have filmed this whole thing live. All of you guys that shared about your amazing companies, please share that out to the world. And you guys can find who is all here, connect, and thank you so much. And big, huge thank you to Amy. The proceeds from tonight are actually going to Book Trust. So what an amazing organization. And thank you guys so much for coming. Do you guys have anything else left to say? This has been an incredible first event.
I do. I have another piece of gratitude I would like to send out, and that's to one of Amy's team members, Ann Pengler, the VP of Marketing for Book Trust. And she's wicked smart. I learned a lot from her, and she was an integral part of making this happen for everybody. And so, thank you, Ann.
Well, thank you guys so much. Now, we're going to have a little party as we go, but one more time, big thank you. I think Christian's coming up. Did you want to say anything? Are you good?
I just wanted to say that every one of you now needs to be inspired to go out and start your own nonprofit with Yippee-Ki-Yay. And even if you don't, thank you again for coming. And thank you, everyone, for being a part of this. And we hope you come to the next Changemakers because this is the first. And we hope to bring awesome people together again like this. So thank you. Absolutely.